Good morning, everyone. Today, for our Sunday Moravian daily text reading, we are in Psalm chapter 50, verse 1 to 6. Now, the psalm starts with this big, dramatic opening, introduction. I almost imagine it a little bit like some grand gathering, and someone says, "Ladies and gentlemen, introducing to you, please be upstanding for it." It's a grand introduction. The mighty one, God the Lord. What an incredible introduction in the psalm. 3 different names for one God. The mighty one. Well, in Hebrew, that is simply the word El. El. God described in the simplest of forms. And El is translated as the mighty one or the majestic one. Now, this is how Nehemiah refers to God in Nehemiah chapter 9. When faced with opposition and hardship, he prays to El. He reminds the people that God's name is El, the mighty one. The mighty one, El. And then our English Bibles simply say God. But that is the Hebrew word Elohim. Elohim. And one of the interesting things about this Hebrew name for God, Elohim, is that it is plural. It speaks of many. A little bit like a king or a queen might use the word we when referring to themselves, plural. You know, for example, was it Queen Victoria who said, "We are not amused"? This idea of a royal plural. This one God that we worship, he needs to be spoken of in the plural. Such is his greatness. So El, Elohim, and then it says the Lord. That's Yahweh in Hebrew. And I'm so glad that the psalmist reminds us that this awesome, majestic God who is referred to in the plural, I am so glad that we are reminded that his name is also Yahweh. Because Yahweh is the name of God first revealed to Moses, the God of covenant relationship. Exodus 3:15, God reveals himself as Yahweh for the first time, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, a God who remembers his promises, a God who remembers and rescues his people, Yahweh. So the psalm starts with El, Elohim, Yahweh. And I think there is something incredibly beautiful and powerful about rehearsing and recalling the names of God. I'd encourage you to spend some time doing that today, maybe in a journal, or maybe write a list, or maybe as a family put down on paper all the different names of God you can think of. I distinctly remember the first time I ever did that in my early teens. I'd said to my Auntie Nancy, one of my spiritual mentors, I'd said, "How do you speak in tongues?" And she said to me, "John, spend some time just praying out every name of God that you can think of. Just pray out all of his names, and when you run out of English words, then the Spirit will fill you with supernatural ones." And that was my experience. So spend some time just recalling the names of God today. Now, don't worry, I'm aware that I'm only halfway through the first verse of chapter 50. I'm not going to go through it verse by verse like this. I think one of the advantages of teaching online is that you can see the length of the video before you commit to it. So just a few minutes more, and actually just 2 more simple points and thoughts that I want to share with you and encourage you with today. The psalmist says that this great, majestic, covenant-keeping God is a God who speaks and it comes to pass. He summons and the earth obeys. And the example that the psalmist uses of this in verse 1 is he says, God speaks to the sun each morning to rise and each evening to set. And it just reminded me of that, one of my favourite quotes, G.K. Chesterton quote, where he says, I'll paraphrase, he says something like, maybe it's not automatic that each day the sun rises, or that each morning flowers open to the sun. Maybe the sun rises to the instruction of God. Maybe the flower opens and turns to his command. And he goes on to say, much like Our God is much like a child who rejoices in the monotony and repetition of youth. Maybe like a joyful child, God says each day, do it again to the Son. And I love that idea because our God is not old and boring. Finally, verse 5, this God who summons the Son and it obeys is a God who summons his holy ones and gathers them to himself. Who are his consecrated ones? Who is the psalmist talking about? His holy ones. The psalmist is talking about those in covenant relationship, those brought in through sacrifice. And folks, we are God's consecrated ones. We are his holy ones. Why? Well, not because of our work or our effort or our holiness, but rather we are in covenant relationship with God through the sacrifice of his Son, Jesus. And today he calls you. He says, come to me. I wonder if, like the sun that rises at his call, I wonder if we too will respond to his invitation.